And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Rishi, who is going to talk a little bit more about our work in detail.
First off, before I start, I would like to thank everyone for coming. This is the first time we've actually sold out the event ever, so I'm very happy. Very happy to see you all here. So now, keep on going. So what areas does HAF advocate in? We work in 3 different areas: education, policy, and community. So let's first talk about education. We work in 3 areas: media, higher education, K-12, textbooks, and teachers. And the reason why we do this is we want a holistic approach to improving and changing the narratives about Hinduism. So our goal is to improve the understanding of Hinduism and Hindus in all these areas. So from the earliest intro to Hinduism, which is the K-12 textbooks and the teachers in middle school and high school, to the most prevalent exposure, the media, where you see things about Hinduism all over, whether it's on TV, print, internet. And then we also engage at the collegiate level, because what's produced in academia is what influences what's shown in the textbooks and in media. So what do we do in all these spheres? So in K-12 education reform, we work in the public process to work on textbooks. We work with publishers directly to get them to revise this. And we also do a Hinduism 101 trainings where we train teachers. So here in Texas, we've done that specifically. The State Board of Education we engaged with 2 times. In 2010 when they had their curriculum standards. And so I went and testified in front of the State Board to get them to put up standards that would allow for a more accurate understanding of Hinduism, which the board had already basically done, so we were able to keep that safe. And then secondly, a year and a half ago, we worked on textbook reform in Texas, and what happens is that the state of Texas has very general curriculum standards. It doesn't specify every specific detail you need, so these publishers fill in the gap on their own and they put in whatever they want. And so we engaged all the publishers and said, listen, your material is not accurate. Doesn't truly show the understanding of Hinduism, like Sheetal has shown before in the textbook slide that she showed earlier. So we engaged all the publishers, and a couple of publishers worked with us right away and said, okay, we'll do it, and we were able to work with them. Other publishers were a little bit harder to work with. And so we went through the public edit process where we submitted public comment, over 100 public comments on different textbooks to get them to revise. And all the publishers had to respond. They had to respond to these textbooks, to these comments and say, all right, we're going to agree to this, we think this, and so on. And then the board voted to accept or not accept the comment. And in almost all the cases, they accepted every single comment. So this is a process that we did in Texas. We got over 100 corrections made, which is a very big deal. But now we have, this isn't a process that's over. In another 6 to 8 years, this will happen again here in Texas. And this happens in every state, and in some states it happens in every county. The State Board of Education doesn't control it, it's the counties that control it. So it's a very long and involved process, and we've been engaged all over the US. If you've heard about what we've done in California, that's the biggest one of all. That's taken up a lot of time. But Texas and California are the 2 biggest markets, and they dictate pretty much how textbooks are written across the country. We also, in the academia sphere, there's the American Academy of Religions, which is where all of these religious studies professors kind of work together. And they have a conference every year. So we go to that conference and we kind of pay attention to what's being said at the conference, see what new papers and theories are being advanced, and make sure that, and understand whether there's something going on, some undercurrent that we need to be aware of and try to get corrected. And we also make sure we arrange for presentations and so on at the conference itself. We do grants and scholarships to promising Hindu-American graduate students that are interested in religious studies. And we also have an academic advisory council where we engage with professors that understand what we are talking about in regards to Hinduism and try to help us make sure we are able to engage the rest of academia as well. Finally, we work with the media in both a reactive and proactive manner. Reactively, it's obvious. Something negative is portrayed in the media. We work to correct it. Whether it's a letter to the editor, we try to get a correction done. We work on getting a news story up that makes more sense about what is actually being said. We do all that in a reactive basis, but also proactively. We have an FAQ, which you guys have on your tables right there, real questions about Hinduism. We have our Hinduism to Go cards, which unfortunately I believe most of the tables have those. I don't know if we have one for everyone, but those are little cards that we hand out to reporters and others that teach very basic facts about Hinduism on a single card. We also have a media toolkit, which we're revising right now. And we also do content creation. We also work on making, like that BuzzFeed article, we put things like that on there, so that way we get things out there. And the biggest piece of content creation we can talk about is our Take Back Yoga campaign, which Sheetal was the primary protagonist, if I want to put that word, in making that happen. And we're on CNN, we got on the New York Times, and we really introduced the concept that yoga is not some commercialized exercise that kind of somehow comes out from the East. It's something that very tied to Hinduism and has a very spiritual aspect. It's not just a bunch of physical exercises. So we did all that. So kind of the projects that we're looking at in terms of this education, we have different things that we'd like to do. And so we would like to do more articles on BuzzFeed, and that takes time and money. We'd like to do more on textbook reform. There's more states that we need to work on. You saw the examples of Hinduism misrepresentation earlier. So we'd like to be able to take a journalist at the Religious Newswriters Association conference to a temple nearby. And usually we can get 100 journalists at once at this conference to go on a field trip to a temple. And we've done this before, and we like doing it every year. There's new journalists coming into the conference. We'd also like to train teachers on Hinduism. So we've trained here in Texas 400 teachers, and we've trained 2,000 nationwide. We'd like to triple that number. We want to get to 6,000 next year. So those are the types of projects that we would love for you to, that's where your contributions can go toward and helping us tonight. In the policy arena, our goal is to shape the policies that impact Hindus here and around the world. The key is to engage all three branches of government: Congress, the legal system, and executive branches, agencies, and departments. So in the domestic sphere, we primarily focus on civil rights. We work on the religious liberty issues like the co-op that we talked about. We work on hate crimes. We were able to get the FBI and the Department of Justice to introduce the anti-Hindu hate crime category last year. So now that statistic is being tracked. Because the first way to find out if there's a real issue with hate crimes against Hindus is to have data. And they didn't even have the data because they weren't tracking it until we pushed them to do it. So one of the other things that we work on is the R1 visa, the religious worker visa. And so this seems very technical, right? Why are we working on a specific visa category? Well, all of our temples use R1 visas to bring in pundits from India to do the pujas and the worship services at the temple. So the R1 visa is not a permanent visa. It has to be renewed every 3 years. And every 3 years, there's always a chance Congress is going to chop it. And so we've been very, very forceful in advocating to make sure that the visa stays around. Because there's, they're like, oh, it promotes illegal immigration or something. They can't figure out how, but they say it. So that's the types of things that we work on. And other policies that impact life here. So in the foreign policy arena, we work on Hindu human rights and religious freedom issues. We produce an annual Hindu human rights report every year. And that's something that tomorrow, if you didn't know already, we have a speaker series where we have 2 leaders from Pakistan talking about a day in the life of a Pakistani Hindu, and they'll be screening the film. It's at Kesha Smurti, and we'll go from 6 to 8 p.m. And it's in partnership with the Hindus of Greater Houston. So that's the kind of things that we work on. We want to bring awareness around this, and this is a nationwide speaking tour that we're doing. And the community recognition, we work on promoting Hindu Awareness Month and Hindu Awareness Days, and recognition of Diwali. And people are like, well, that seems very symbolic. Why worry about that type of thing? It is symbolic, but what it does for us is to help us create connections to lawmakers. We create those connections, we get to introduce and talk about the Hindu American community to them, So that way, when there's a substantive issue that we need them to work on, they already know us. And that's our goal. So that's the one of the things we'd like to do next year with the Texas Legislature, is to do that. We definitely need a staffer here to pull it off, because I'll be traveling to Austin quite often. But that's something we'd like to do, that we'd like to have a Hindu Awareness Month, the month of October, and where they recognize it, so that way we build those connections in Austin. So the whole point is that policy is a means to both educate and improve the lives of Hindus. So in terms of our projects, we have the DC Policy Conference that we do every year. It is a very big conference. We have a couple of people here that attended it in our advocacy days. Vikram Shashadri and Ashok Danda both attended it this year, and I'm sure they would both tell you it was a very enlightening and educational and very 2 long days, but they learned that they were able to do so much. And Ashok, Uncle, and I were both on the same team, and we went and talked to congressional staffers about Hinduism. We got to talk to Pete Olson about our issues and so on. And so it's a very important way to impress upon congressmen and congressional staffers the Hindu American community's interests and what we're advocating for. It's a chance for you to get involved. We'd love you all to come to DC and be at the conference and come to DC Days. If we had everyone in this room, I tell you we'd have a lot more impact in DC than we do now, and it would be impressive. One of the other things that we do is we have we've done refugee medical clinics in Jodhpur for Pakistani Hindu refugees. Dr. Irvin Chandrakantan, Irvin, raise your hand. Where are you? There's someone in the back. He's one of those. He went to Jodhpur and was part of a medical relief mission there to do clinics, and this is something that we do very often. We like to do it as much as we can, and so we'd like to fund this some more.